Hello everyone, this is Particular Mushroom, and I want to start a podcast. I've been thinking about this for quite some time, but I just can't quite get all the puzzle pieces together. So I figured, why don't I just talk about it? And that's how this video is going to go. I'm going to give the pitch, talk about some of my concerns, going to ask my questions for you all, and then finally I'm going to give a little sampler of how a podcast episode of Luigi's Mansion might look. And even before we get to the sampler, this video is going to mimic how a podcast might be. And by that I mean it's going to be unscripted, but I have notes here. So way back, it's been, like 6 years at this point. I did Particular Discast. It was an experimental series of 5 podcast episodes where I got folks from Particular Discord on a call to discuss video games. And it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed getting in there and hashing out some convos about video games and some of the happenings going on in the gaming world at that time. And there were a couple of things I was thinking about tweaking. But as I reflected on those things that I wanted tweaked and how I could improve the podcast, I kind of realized that I wanted to change up the structure a little bit. Specifically, I want them to be deep dives. And now that's not to say that we didn't dive deep on some of those conversations in the Particular Discast. But the key is I want the focus to be on deep diving on these video games. So the pitch is in-depth analysis of game mechanics in a relaxed conversational setting. A lot of podcasts are very focused on the guests that show up on the show, and I do like that angle. But for my podcast, I want to specifically focus on game mechanics and dissecting them. Which, by the way, if you do know any podcasts that do that well, please let me know. I would really like to have some to listen to. Which, an aside, is they don't listen to podcasts much these days, because there's just a little bit too much banter for me. Hi, this is me, and here's what I've been playing lately, and here's what I do on the side, and here's how I became a Pikmin fan in the first place. And I don't dislike that. But the problem with a lot of these podcasts are that's the first 30 whole minutes. It's not even related to the actual game. It's all this stuff outside of it. And I really want a podcast that gets into the meat of things. I actually just listened to a podcast the other day that was, no joke, 10% about the topic of the podcast, the reason they got in a room and recorded. The other 90% was other unrelated things, which there's a space for that, of course. But again, if we're talking about what I'm going to be inspired to put energy and effort into, I really want to go in deep on these video games. There can be jokes and banter and anecdotes, but I want to lead back to, this is why bulb orbs are mechanically engaging, instead of a simple, that's why I like bulb orbs. You kind of catch the drift on the difference there? I get a little tired these days of, I'm going to sit here and talk about this thing for 30 minutes, and at the end of those 30 minutes, I'm not even going to have a conclusion. I'm just going to be like, okay, thanks for listening to me yap, bye-bye. I really want to try and extract some value. And I know podcast, but it doesn't matter to me how succinctly we get to the conclusion. I just want the end goal to be some sort of conclusion or insight. How does me liking it relate to the truth about this mechanic? Right? Having a perspective on mechanics and systems you like or didn't like in a game are valuable. I just want you to take that opinion and evaluate why that is. Extract some value of game design from that. And say not just that this is good or isn't good, but why and how isn't this good or is it good? Because going back to the pitch, it's a casual discussion on a deep topic. And if we don't come to the most scientifically accurate, distilled nugget of wisdom possible, that's fine. But I want the aim to be get as close to a nugget of wisdom as possible. Preferably a lot of nuggets of wisdom. A lot of insights on how and why those game mechanics work so that you can come away having learned something about game design and broadened your horizons a little bit. Now, this is when I need your help. The first thing is, quite bluntly, should this even be a podcast? Because I can just make standard videos, just put together a talking point about Bulborbs and compile it into a standard video like I've been doing on the channels. But I want to note here that if I were to do that, I'm not going to do any fancy editing for the series. An explicit design goal here is to have a series where I can do some research, record, and then put it out there so we can have a discussion. Which I guess does mean that if you do think all my videos should be layered with that distinct, deliberate editing style, then I probably should just drop the podcast idea altogether. So don't be afraid to tell me that if that's the reality I have to wake up to. But I just want to be clear that the intent is to have a little bit lower stakes than the main channel so I can make a consistent series out of it. Okay, so then part 2 of this is, should it just be me or with guests? I've been leaning towards having guests pretty much this entire deliberation period. I really enjoyed having folks from particular Discord on the Discast, and I would like to continue that trend. A good part of the fun with podcasts anyway is having conversations. But that does complicate things a lot more. My gamer friends and acquaintances all play video games at different paces. So I will get situations where I really want to discuss a certain game, but no one else has played it recently. An easy example is my one pal played Subnautica 2 the day it released to early access, whereas I'm waiting for the full release. Nothing wrong with either approach, but we probably won't be able to sync up and have an in-depth conversation about it. It would make sense, why don't you start out with just me and then transition to having guests once it's the right time? But something in me says it's not going to be as compelling. Another concern too is that it probably would mean more tangents with no pushback. And what I mean by that is, if I get an idea in my head and I want to try and explain it, even if my idea isn't making sense, is completely off base, or I just have some core information wrong about one of my stipulations or pieces of evidence, there's no one there to give me pushback. There's no one there to be like, wait, what do you mean by this? And what do you mean by that? Can you clarify this? And I'm not sure that's correct. And again, that's part of the fun of a podcast, right? Is to have that back and forth. That said, having notes like I do now should help me keep grounded so I don't go wildly off topic for 20, 30 minutes. But the most important thing is, are you interested in this idea? Is this something that you guys would be interested in? What would you like to hear in a hypothetical podcast? Maybe you think podcast is good, but drop the deep dive stuff. I don't know what you're going on. Discast was great. Just keep doing that. Consensus really could be something that I just didn't even think of yet. And you can really give me anything here. Game ideas, general guidelines, what you think. I'll take any feedback, but of course I'm going to listen to all of you and try and decide the best path forward. I'm not really going to be concerned with how many views this podcast gets, but the people who are listening in, I want to make sure their opinions are heard. Your opinions are heard. Because if you're not getting any value out of it, then I might as well put my energy to other things. I'm a bit particular, right? There's a reason the banter podcasts go mainstream, and I'm not expecting this to go mainstream. But I do think I have some value to add, and just am trying to figure out the best vessel to relay that information. So, to start closing out here, I want to put in a small sampler. This is what you can expect from the podcast if it's just me and we go forward with my idea as I've said it thus far. So, if I was to do an episode on Luigi's Mansion, for example, it might sound something like this. I really enjoy Luigi's Mansion. Back like 10 years ago, I made a list of my favorite games of all time. And I know that list has changed, but I can very definitely say that Luigi's Mansion was on there. It's just got such a great vibe. I say this over and over again, but the GameCube era was so unique. Nintendo was trying all kinds of things that they just won't do these days. One of the easiest things to point out with Luigi's Mansion is that contrast between the realistic furniture and cartoonish Luigi and Egad and the ghosts. It's such a fun dichotomy. And collecting treasure is great too. Always like games where I can collect shiny things. And it's everywhere in Luigi's Mansion. Oh my goodness. But there's one thing that I think sets this game apart. And that is the controls. Are you ready for this? So to catch a ghost in Luigi's Mansion, you first have to sneak up on them. They are invulnerable normally, but you have a trusty flashlight with you. You can't just shine the light on the ghost, though. You have to spook them. And you do that by getting really close to them before you shine the light. The closer you are to the ghost when you shine them with that flashlight, the longer they'll stay stunned for. That's already fun enough as is, and it's cool as a reverse of what the ghosts are trying to do to Luigi. They want to scare Luigi, and now you are scaring them back, essentially. It's hilarious. But then there's part 2, which is you have to secure the tether with the ghost. And you do that by slamming down on the R button. And then there's part 3, which is you actually have to catch the ghost now. So you have to tilt the control stick and C stick in the opposite direction while continuing to hold down R. And that doesn't sound too crazy, but the range of efficiency in this encounter makes it very interesting. And fun. Yeah, fun. You want to catch that ghost as quickly as possible, no doubt, which requires you to tilt in perfect tandem against the ghost while watching your surroundings for obstacles and still holding down R. It's a lot going on in the moment, but at the same time, you just have to catch the ghost. Depending on the ghost you're fighting, they might not break away with one small slip-up. And even if you lose the tether, you just shine them with the flashlight again, it's not too bad. And so you can stumble through the game with grit, determination, and collecting a bunch of hearts from furniture. But as you progress through the game, if you improve your skills, you are rewarded with catching the ghosts faster. And in the case of portrait ghosts, improving your skills means capturing them all in one go, which causes bigger pearls to drop that improve your score. And all of that is just complicated enough to feel like a rush every single time. Even though you're doing fundamentally the same thing over and over again throughout the game, there are puzzles and fights with different mechanics occasionally. You get to peel back layers of complexity as you get better capturing ghosts. Capturing multiple ghosts at the same time, completely optional, but hilariously fun. Learning how the ghosts spawn in the room can allow you to position yourself better to capture them quicker. Even without the pearls from the portrait ghosts or any of the other in-game mechanics that actually reward you for improving with your skills, and just stuffing them in that vacuum faster is rewarding all by itself, by allowing you to be quicker, more efficient, more ruthless. Yeah, get in here, you nerd! The amount of times I audibly say things out loud when I finally get the ghost swirling into the backpack it's something that I think a lot of mechanics in games should really strive for. Yes, it's great when I'm rewarded by the game with something for having good skill, but just as fun or even better in some circumstances is when learning the mechanics available to me allow me to have more fun without the game saying anything at all. And that's why I think Luigi's Mansion is one of the greats, and why future games in the series don't hit the same mechanical highs, even if they do get close. The slam in Luigi's Mansion 3 is great fun, but it's a little too simple, I feel. And then I could get all into the other 2 games and how they do their mechanics and compare-contrast to 1, 2, and 3 and make some more conclusions about how to implement fun mechanics in your games. I hope that's enough of a sampler to give you an idea for what this podcast would look like. Thank you for listening and considering my proposal. Your feedback is pivotal on how I decide to move forward, because I ideally want to stay as close to my vision as possible, but I don't think the idea is fermented enough to give it a green light just yet. Now, if everyone says that was great, more please, then okay. But I have a feeling you guys have some important critiques and opinions to give me so I can make this podcast better than I currently envision it. But on top of all of that, consider this a heads up that if you are interested in being a guest, if we do decide to go that route, to keep tabs on the socials so we can contact you and potentially pull you in for a chat. Recording would most likely be on the Discord. Facecam would not be expected, I won't be using one, though you would need better than a phone mic. I would imagine you would have to sign an agreement. The business side of things is honestly quite annoying, which is part of why I want to check with y'all if guests is even something we're interested in before I commit to figuring that out. Anyway, I think I got out all the important bits of information. and let's hope we figure out the way to pull this together, because I'd really like to do some podcast episodes. It would be a lot of fun. Thank you once again, and please have a great day. Bye.